Her research itself tells us, there's so much of scope to do so much more research into what you were saying, the indicators about caste and so many different things in there. So thank you so much, Dr. Guster, Dr. Shishati, and Dr. Jasmine Ma for your presentations. And I think Dr. Kumar would like to wrap it up. And the only thing I can say is, when we talk about
very, very exciting and knowledgeable, and we have a very distinguished speaker like Dr. Jasmine and Dr. Shekhar Shashagri. I want to congratulate both of you, giving you the best of your life's experience in the field of mental health and how to go ahead with the collective efforts. Now, just tracking the Professor Jasmine's efforts to build a dream cultural therapy. She has started the work from Jamaica, and then she's currently working in Canada, and her long experience, she thinks that it's spoken on so many aspects of the child and mental health problems. Different aspects, school, family, crimes, rape, neglected children, and so many things. He has a long experience, and we are very grateful for his. He often comes to Nepal, and he makes Dr. Arun to work very closely, and I can see that in a way, Dr. Sheshadi grew up Dr. Arun. And he fits the good ideas to him, and Dr. Arun tries to implement them. Thank you, Sheshad, for your nice cooperation and love for Nepal. And you have shown, I think this is useful for the learners how to conduct an epidemiological survey. And it was a good effort, and I appreciate that. On the whole, all the three speakers were very, very learned, distinguished, and I want to congratulate them. Thank you very much.
In attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. DSM described these symptoms as operating predominantly in attentive type, predominantly of the ADHD. This mean worldwide prevalence rate of ADHD consists of 5.29 to 7.1%. Though hospital-based, though prevalence study is not done till the date in Nepal, so I would like to discuss with you hospital-based study among child psychiatric population who are implemented in the child psychiatric unit. The first study highlighted the prevalence rate of 10.1%, which was done in Human University Teaching Hospital. In 2010, recent data of County Children's Hospital also shows that there has been 7.85% of the ADHD children presented in our OPD. So this prevalence showed that ADHD exists diagnosed and treated in Nepal. However, standardization of tool is not done till the date in Nepal. We are still depending on the tool developed in other country and other language, I would say in other contexts, which may lead to inaccurate diagnosis. Many of the studies show that tools developed in another culture and context leads to inaccurate diagnosis, and which lead to distrust among mental health professionals. So this small project will fill the gap between this problem and to minimize the inaccurate diagnosis. Having this tool in our context ensures ethical and responsible practice in mental health professions, safeguarding the negligent children, preserve the right for a fair assessment of their problems, provide a valid instrument for future research, and for clinical diagnosis, planning of interventions, and educational placement. This is the objectives of today's presentation. Here I want to discuss about the preliminary findings of my project. With the quantitative studies, there are two types of participants. One is clinical participants and another is community participants. These are the hospitals and private clinics of my study site, from general population as well as from clinical population. Total sample size was randomly. The Gorkha district, Chittagong district, Kathmandu, and Tapeli. There are two types of participants. One is community participant and another is clinical participants. We are talking here about the clinical samples.
So those 736 were taken as a CBQ positive, and their control were 445 were taken from those children who did have a negative cutoff in the CBQ. So to compare the more EBP in the second phase, among those already have some problem in CBQ, and among those who were not having problems in CBQ. In detailed phase, it's a child behavior checklist. Teachers rated from TRF was used. I'm coming on the tools later. There were actually 3 different tools were used. The school data sheet were more like a semi-structure developed by the researchers following the already practiced tool, partly from the child behavior checklist and partly from, in our context, were followed from other studies. And CBQ, I already told you that that was in the screening phase. And CBQ was adopted and validated in a small sample during this research. Both retest reliability and inter-rater reliability were satisfactory to use this tool in a main screening phase. In the detailed phase, teachers rated from TRF was used, and it was also adopted. It was the first time. This was the first study which adopted and translated, adopted, and validated in a small sample before we use in the bigger sample. So TRF was adopted and validated in a small sample like a CBQ. The sensitivity and both retest reliability, that was found quite satisfactory to go on with this tool for the major study. Now I am coming to the results part. Firstly, the result of the screening phase. Gender-wise, there was not much differences. 53% were boys and 47% were girls. But rural-urban setting is there is a huge number of the children belong to the rural setting, almost 83%. Then the urban. Similarly, family type, nuclear family, more than 63% child belong to the nuclear family, and Hindu is dominant in the religion. Interestingly, while going through all the 2,919 data, it was found that 1.2% of the adolescents, they were married while they were even studying in the schools like 9 or 10 grade, and more boys, 0.9% were boys and 0.3% were girls, and they were more from the rural parts where child marriage is still common, and this data was collected almost 10 years back, so that time even it is more common. So regarding the ethnic caste distribution wise, as a dominant ethnic groups of Kshatriya, Brahmin, and then other ethnic groups were represented, and parental occupations is a more farmer, and also the service holders' parents were also there. Regarding the educations, very large number of the mother were illiterate than the fathers. 50%, more than 50% mothers were illiterate, while the only 17% father were illiterate, and others were. Majority of the parents, those who are literate, they belong to only for primary level educations. Regarding the economic status, a large number of the children belong to the families whose earning is less than 3,000. You can see the 1 to 2,000, 37.5%, and 2 to 3,000 is 52%. So over 3,000 is a very less number of the children's pulse. CBQA also assesses the scholastic backwardness. There is a one items where there is a light skills, but the one particular skills very poor in scholastic performance were considered as a question to assess the scholastically backwardness. And the scholastic backwardness rate was observed 6.7%. There is not significant gender differences in scholastic backwardness. Higher level psychological disturbed children were found. 20.6%. Scholastic backwardness is found high in those children who were already have a CBQ positive. That means they were already found as a disturbed in CBQ. So 12.6% were the CBQ disturbed cases in comparison to control, where it is a 4.7% only. So almost more than 3 times disturbed children are likely to have the scholastic problems. In the scholastic problems, common were mathematical problems, which is very huge, and then reading and writing difficulties. Prevalence of psychological problems, overall prevalence in CBQ, particularly in screening phase, is a 24.5, and then it's higher in the boys than the girls. Grade 1, 2, 5, and 7, it has a high rate of prevalence than the other grades. Caste-wise, it's again more problems were observed in Kshatriya and Brahmin, followed by Hill Dalits and Rai Gurung ethnicity. Higher problems observed in the families where income status is less than 3,000 per month, which is again in a very economically low condition.
Any questions, please?
Yes. My question is regarding the use of your rating scale. In your subjects are from the government schools, and in government schools in our setting, the tool has been developed in a setting where teachers are given much more responsibility, and they are much more observant about the students' behavior. But here in our government schools, there are many number of students is also most of the time more, and teachers are less observant about the students' behavior. So have you cross-checked if the teachers reporting are actually corroborating with the actual behavior of the student during a pilot study or other things? Otherwise, I think the whole report might be skewed. One point is that. Other is, I think there were some data inconsistencies in your presentation as well. For example, you have presented that overall psychological problems were 24.5%. In the bracket, you mentioned that boys 14.27% and girls 10.27%. If you take the average of this, it comes around 12 or 12.5%. But you have mentioned the addition, so 20, I think that there was data inconsistency regarding that. Can you show me that overall psychological problems?
No, I understand your That is why in the pilot test, it was observed that which teachers will respond to the CBQ and whether the teachers really know the child or not. And that's why there is a more like, teachers who is responsible as a class teachers who has frequent interactions with the student. Those teachers were assigned to fill of the CBQ. TRF, it was researcher himself and other supervisors also very much involved supporting to fill out. So that's how the validity of the data we try to ensure. Regarding the total percentage of the CBQ, it's the addition, it's not the average, because we need in total then how many goes to the boys and how many goes to the girls. This after having the
and within the OPD patients, we try to compare the amount of patients that were diagnosed with conversion disorder. And the number of visits for conversion disorder in the year 2015, that is a 6-month sample, was around 11.6%. The next year it was around 9.14%, and then 5.41, 6.11, 7.31 in average. So what I would like you to notice is that at first it seems like we were diagnosing more number of children with conversion disorder, and as the years went by, the percentage of diagnosis seems to be decreasing. And we had a discussion about why that is, because it cannot be happening if it was a static number. So it seems like we are now diagnosing disorders behind the conversion symptoms more and not limiting ourselves to the symptoms of conversion. So that could be one explanation of why the number is decreasing. The average percentage till now is around 7.3%. And again, this is a slide I kept because we had a discussion with one of the neurologists, pediatric neurologist, and she was very confused when I talked about conversion disorder and conversion symptoms, or symptoms of conversion disorders. She had a problem understanding what is the difference. The difference in data is that conversion symptom is very prevalent. It is very prevalent. It would come around 20%, 20 to 25% of the total patients coming to us will have some sort of conversion symptoms. But if we diagnose that disorder, then it decreases to around 7.37%. The difference is that there are a certain set number of criteria that have to be met for a child to be diagnosed as conversion disorder, but conversion symptoms are symptoms that can occur on and off and have a primary diagnosis of some other disorder that have to be addressed first before the conversion symptoms can be taken care of. Hence this list of comorbid diagnoses, and when you reviewed the data, it seemed like anxiety spectrum disorders were the most common comorbid conditions. Phobia, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and in phobia also, because we started right after the earthquake, I have not mentioned it over here, besides social and school phobia, we also had quite a large number of children who were scared of thunder because that was the weather when the earthquake came, so they had very specific phobia of thunder, and so on and so forth. In the spectrum of stress-related disorders, again, because we started right after the earthquake, acute stress disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and adjustment disorders were quite common. And depressive illness. And in the later half of our work, we have been noticing more evolving personality disorders, and it seems like the severe of conversion disorder symptoms come when there is some sort of evolving personality disorders. Coming to the types of presentations, dissociative convulsion was the most common presentation, followed by trance and possession disorders, and then mixed presentation, which consisted of dissociative convulsion and trance and possession disorder symptoms as well, dissociative motor disorders, which include psychogenic aphonia and symptoms relating to the motor functions of body, and then dissociative anesthesia and sensory loss as well. Again, this is a brief flowchart of how we went about coming to this data. We keep a record of each and every patient in our OPD. The record is not extensive. That is one of the limitations. That is the OPD data that we keep for every patient. And what we did retrospectively was we tabulated all the data especially the ones diagnosed at conversion disorder. And then we tried to analyze it in terms of the demographic profile that we had recorded already in the OPD data, and types of symptoms, methods of treatment, and then the trend of follow-up. Again, I would like to mention it right at the start of because it was a retrospective review, we had not decided on the framework of what number of data we are taking, what profile we are inquiring about. It was more of a review of what we already had collected. There was some difficulty in record keeping because it was manual record kept in the OPD. It is a very rushed job, and there were different clinicians, so no clear guidelines for diagnosing a case with conversion disorder was decided upon, but we did follow our clinical judgment, and that's what the diagnosis was based on. And the data is not extensive in the sense that demographic profile could have been much more looked into, and we could not do that. Overall disorders and the diagnosis of conversion disorder, it seems like there was 59% of 7 to 11 years of the CD cases were diagnosed between 7 to 11 years of age, and 46% of CD diagnosis fell into the 12 to 14 years bracket. Come to gender, and it was a very interesting thing to notice that Dr. Jasmine and Dr. Prospect also mentioned like male are in the epidemiological studies, male have been noticed to have more emotional and behavioral problems. So you can see in this data that this is specifically for conversion disorder. In every year, we can see that females are diagnosed more than the males.
Problem-focused coping. Early female adolescents had significant higher score than late male adolescents in problem-focused coping, and similar result was also found in emotion-focused coping as well. So this result has defied the commonly held belief and expectation that women are more prone to emotion-focused coping and boys are more prone to problem-focused coping, and this is testimony to the fact that gender stereotype concept for role and socialization is changing. So woman is being more assertive, and their role as mother and caretaker is changing, and therefore their coping patterns is also changing. So the possible implications of my research is special care for the girls, especially who are in early adolescence, should be given more priority, as they have significantly less emotional well-being than the boys of the same age group. And the facilitation of the inbuilt coping mechanism of the children who are living in child care homes of Kathmandu Valley. So these are my references. So at last, I would like to acknowledge Central Department of Psychology, Tribhuvan University for supervising my work, and Central Psych Board for funding this study. Thank you.
You also finish your presentation within.
It's not a question, it's a comment. So I believe this is the first study in Nepal in this topic within the child care home. And you have mentioned that 505 something, that is the registered child care home in CCWP.
Yes.
I believe now it has been increased to 800 or something. I believe.
What we mean by that is that there is an adversity and you have a response to that. So it's not a singular construct, it's a superordinate construct. What would be critical for the next phase of the work that Sujan probably needs to do is what does this mean for an individual child in a childcare institution? And sometimes research like this can oversimplify the reality in the institutions. Childcare institutions broadly divided are of two types: those for children in conflict with the law and those for children in need of care and protection. Children in need of care and protection have a whole range of backgrounds they come from. They may be orphan abandoned status, they may be HIV positive. Unfortunately, from the study, we don't know what kind of institutions these are and what is the background that these children come from, and so these would be some of the kind of limitations of the, irrespective of whether coping is problem focused or emotion focused. Here is a very simple story of a 16-and-a-half-year-old girl from a single parent family. It was very exceedingly intelligent but quite troublesome to her family. And she was staying in a very caring and a lovely Christian-run childcare institution. But she had befriended a somewhat older adolescent and had engaged with him in intimacy. And during the vacation, it so happened that the mother could not look after her, so and the institution had to close. So in her own wisdom, she decided to complain to the Child Welfare Committee and got her put in a state-run childcare institution.
I am not from medical, health or research background, so my presentation is pretty raw. It may sounds, maybe in some cases, illogical. So excuse me for that if that happens. So what I'm going to talk about the situation of disability and then mental health or mental disability within the whole scenario of disability in Ilam district. I have introduction, objective, implementation process of our project, and the result with implication which I'm going to share with you this afternoon. First of all, I would like to go through a story of a child, an 11-year-old child with autism. The child was born at home and cried after 5 minutes of delivery according to the mother. It may not be accurate time. Parents sought traditional healers in the beginning as the child didn't make any friend and had difficulty in socialization. 3 years back, we were here in Ilam to organize a screening camp to assess disability, and he was identified as a child with autism, and then all this process of disability card and all the protection mechanism that government of Nepal provides were introduced to him. The program has community-based rehabilitation facilitators, trained one. They are making regular home visit and counseling and supporting the parents. Some improvements have been observed, seen, but it's long way to go. This is a story that I would like to put before we get into the scenario. I think I do not need to talk much about what mental health is. It is often neglected issue. The social stigma and discrimination associated with it refrains children and adults with disabilities to enjoy their basic human rights. The effect move even beyond the person to his or her family and society as well. And in this case, there is no one-stop solution. It may go throughout his or her life. So parents and the society and the system has to be ready to deal with this situation. Something about Karuna. Karuna is a Nepalese NGO which was established in Nepal in 2007 as an international NGO, and we converted it into a Nepalese NGO in 2015. The goal of Karuna is to prevent avoidable disabilities among children and adults, and development of disability inclusive society. That means community-based rehabilitation to provide opportunity to grow as a full human being for a person with disability in the local community. And as we all know, there was a pretty strong earthquake in 2015, which compelled our organization also to be involved in this disaster relief and rehabilitation, which we conducted in a very inclusive manner. We have a project called Inspire to Care. The cycle of this project is 5 years. Now we are revising it for 3 years, and we are covering the whole district of Ilam. And the project beneficiaries are Golden 1,000 Days mothers and children under 10 years of age, and every person with disabilities and their families in the Lam district. The component, as I said, in prevention, we talk about prevention of disability by birth and prevention of developing disabilities in the early stage. And then in terms of community-based rehabilitation, we follow WHO CVR matrix, which is called 5 by 5 box. That includes health, education, livelihood, empowerment, and social. And then we strengthen community structures to carry out these activities even after the exit of the project. We strongly follow 3 principles while implementing our program: that we partner with local government before signing an agreement with local government to share the cost, and to internalize the program within their annual and multi-year plan. We do not start our project. So the cost sharing of the total cost of the project and internalizing that plan within their own annual and multi-year plan is the basic condition that we apply in every project, municipalities and palikas that we are working. This looks pretty clumsy. The prevention of disability part goes through the health system, and disability management goes through the municipalities.
Another student revealed that her parents had taken her to a faith healer who said that some black magic was done on her, and till they don't do offering at midnight, 12 o'clock, it's going to continue. Although the student didn't follow up with it because she said that she didn't believe in such things. Teachers also attributed these episodes to sexual reasons, saying that if children wanted to indulge and if they did, then they would be all right. Parents attributed the cause to be female gender and age factors, saying that there are more stressors during this period of time. Environmental factors like family, school, and children not being able to express their feelings. And one parent was not sure about the cause. Teachers said that it was because of stress, but they also said that probably this is happening because they want to excuse themselves from the classes. And because teachers were aware that it was because of stress, they didn't know what to do about it. And they didn't know how to handle the situation, although often they would tell the students that you're just acting or making excuses to not attend the classes. So the third code here is symptom progression. Students said that in the future, either they'll have the same problem that will continue or some other problem would be more significant. The other students said that it will reduce in the future, and if stress goes away, so will that problem. All the parents believed that it was not a life-threatening condition and children were getting better. And teachers believed that currently it's decreasing, but because it was a backward place and most families come from poor backgrounds, that they would have some stress. So even in the future, they'll continue to have problems like this. Teachers were also not very satisfied and thought that they were making excuses because the children wouldn't have any problems during the holidays, or they'd be fine in shorter classes and they'd show more symptoms in longer classes. So they thought, they would think that why is this happening? Probably because they want to get excused. So continuation and improvement of problems and reasons at present. Most students thought that they are improving in symptoms. One student didn't have any symptoms anymore, whereas there was another one student that had continuation of the same symptoms. They said that it continued because they were afraid and stressed, and improved because they knew how to do relaxation, how to get rid of their stress, change the way they were thinking, do fun, pleasurable activities when uncomfortable, and medication. Parents thought that it's continuing because of ongoing family stress, that the family may not be able to meet the child's expectations, and there's probably improvement because medication and children themselves had learned how to deal with it. Teachers thought that it would continue because of socioeconomic and family stresses. Like I mentioned, they come from poor backgrounds and they have other areas, and families wouldn't understand or accept the reason that their illness is given. They said that improvement, they know how to deal with their problems, and because students, they themselves know that they have to isolate themselves or isolate the person who was going to have an episode, was helping, and they were a little normal about this not being a big illness and things like that. The fifth.
Okay, no questions? Okay, thank you, Isa. Now we have last presentation of this session.
Part of Nepal. So this project was a school-based intervention program which was aimed to prevent the violence against children and promoting mental health using evidence-based behavioral management strategy. And our main focus group was teachers, but at the same time we took the information from parents whose children were studying in those schools, and today I am presenting the data from parents only. So the main sample of the study are the parents, they are not the children. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge my research team. This project was funded by UBS Optimus Foundation, which was a 2-year project, and the Health Right International, New York University School of Medicine, Sakriya Seva Samaj, and Nepal Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health and District Education Office. And ethical review and clearance was received from Nepal Health Research Council. And similarly, I'd like to acknowledge the Health Research team, NIU Research team, and our implementing partner. Okay, so regarding the topic, yeah, it's about parenting, and as we all know that parenting is a key determinant in the development and maintenance of childhood behavioral problem. And parenting may include different aspects, for example, giving warmth, giving structure, limit setting, supporting the child during difficult moments, letting them to do things they want, and setting some kind of boundaries. And the parent-child relationship is a factor to motivate and influence on aspect of child development, parenting skills, and behaviors have positive impact on children's self-esteem, school achievement, cognitive development, as well as some behaviors. So, in this background, as you all know that in Nepal, the violence against children, and if we look at this practice, over 80% of children aged between 1 to 4 experience violent discipline, and most strikingly, the vast majority of children experience violence at the hand of those entrusted to take care of them. So in parenting practice, the harsh disciplinary practice is very much prevalent. And if we talk about the parental mental health problem, given the high prevalence of mental health problem in Nepal, the parental mental health is also at risk due to different social political adversity, and which is also directly related to poor child mental health outcome. However, there is little less known about the mental health prevalence and the mechanism that contributed to poor child mental health in families with young children in Nepal. So this research was aimed to examine the prevalence of mental health problems in parents, and the other important purpose was to study the link between the parental mental health and well-being, and how that well-being is affecting the parenting practices and the children's mental health outcome in Nepalese family. And this research is guided by family stress model, which assumes that the economic adversity, which is directly related to the parenting practice, and which reduces the parental well-being, and which is in turn related to increased parent-child conflict, and that parent-child conflict is related to child mental health outcome. So this is the conceptual framework of our study, and for our study, for parental well-being or parental mental health, we have taken 4 measures, that is mental health, social support, physical health, and perceived social class. For parenting behavior, we have tried to assess the belief about using corporal punishment, discouragement of negative emotion, parent-child conflict, harsh inappropriate discipline, praise, incentive, and setting clear rules and expectation. And we studied how these parenting practices are affecting child mental health outcomes, and the specific factors that we studied is the social competence, anger, anxiety, and depression problem. The sample of the study, as I said earlier, the data was derived from the
statistics, very useful, and also Srijana for the very useful statistics in parenting and child mental health. I would like to especially thank Dr. Jaya Regni and Isha Bista for presenting a very pertinent issue of conversion and dissociative disorder, especially mass conversion disorder is, of course, of area of concern. As we know, we have Ministry of Health released a manual, but that manual has to reach all health posts, even all schools, because as we see that these problems are not being addressed adequately, especially in those schools, in those areas where the communication, the health professional access is very limited, and the awareness about the mental health is also limited. I have some experiences myself in Kavre, not very far from here. I think Ajay will substantiate that. We have managed few school mass conversion disorder, and that the consciousness of the people in the teacher, the headmasters, the community, they all had a lot of misconceptions. I hope that this manual will reach all the health posts, all the health auxiliary workers. And with this, I would like to conclude this very important session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, presenter, for the nice presentation. Now, I would like to request our chairperson and co-chairperson to hand over the token of love to our presenter. So as usual, I would like to hand over the session to our chairperson and co-chairperson.
We have two presentations in this session. The first presentation is on calm mood disorders, use of digital technology to empower adolescents affected by mood and anxiety issues. So we have now the upcoming issues about digital drugs and internet addiction, and now this is another part how digital technologies can be used for better.
So potential benefits, because it's not been rolled out. But I will present some data on the qualitative evaluation that we have done as a pilot, and then talk through next steps. And I'd really welcome any discussions, because we would like to take this wider once it's been developed and try and see if there's a possibility of adapting it to different cultural contexts, including Nepal, possibly India as well. So why did we go about this? Mood charting in adults with mood disorders has a very strong evidence base for helping people not only detect early signs of a relapse, which is to say when people are just about starting to get unwell, but more importantly, it also helps them identify what these early signs are. Not everybody relapses in the same way. So when I get unwell, I have a particularly nasal voice with a cold, whereas my wife develops a sore throat. So we're all slightly different, even with the same condition. Well, we tried to get young people to do pen and paper mood charts, which I'll just show you in a second, but we only had 30% of young people. So I work for the university, and in the UK we have clinical academics like myself are employed by the university, but we spend half our time also doing clinical work. So I do both research and clinical work. And my clinical sessions are in one of two tertiary national services for young people under the age of 18 with mood disorders. So when all other consultants in child psychiatry are feeling quite stuck because somebody's not getting better, they would often seek a second opinion from me and our team. So these are usually highly motivated young people. They really want to get better. But even in that patient population, we couldn't seem to engage them. There are other benefits, especially for young people, in terms of monitoring mood, it allows for a sense of autonomy and self-regulation. It is incredibly difficult for a young person if they develop depression or if they have bipolar disorder. One young person told me when I asked her what it felt like to have bipolar disorder, she said, it's a little bit like going to sleep and not knowing when you wake up if you're going to be Eeyore or Tigger. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with Winnie the Pooh, but these are the exact opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of their activity levels and how they behave. I think that really does describe how it feels, and that's how it felt to her. But what I'm trying to capture here is this sort of sense of lack of control. So I'd like to show you what we were trying to get them to engage in, and we had co-designed this with young people. I hadn't just come up with it on my own. And so this was, we felt quite simple. They all were asked to put in their date, their time scores on a scale of 1 to 10, what time they woke up at and what time they slept, and what medication they were taking. And we all usually get this information from them, and then our assistant psychologist in the team would convert this into a flowchart for them to see, look at patterns of mood. How many of you work with young people here? Just a show of hands. Wow, phenomenal. And can you imagine what their response was when I would give them this sheet? I'm not going to be rude here, but it was fairly rude things. But this is what they would usually do, being polite. Top the handmate, I am doing this shit. Yeah, I did promise I wouldn't swear, but I'm sorry, I did. And I think there's something to be said about listening to young people. Those of us that work with young people really understand the importance of engaging with them, of trying to break down the barriers. So I asked the young people why they wouldn't fill this up. And they said it was cumbersome, it was boring, I couldn't remember to fill it up. It doesn't immediately tell me until I come back to you what my pattern of mood symptoms is. So they had some valid points. What we started to do as a first step was, now those of you who have, anybody in this room not have a smartphone? Anybody? So you've all got smartphones. Anybody know a 13 to 18-year-old who doesn't have a smartphone? Most young people engage in smartphones and technology. So we asked them to open up in Apple. There is a section on notes. You can create your own notes, and we would ask them to just put a date. So going back to that, we would ask them to put the date and their mood score for the day, and every week email it to us. We created a separate email address, and they would email this to us, and we would then email back to them their algorithm. And I had thought, because they all kept saying, if you had an app, we would fill it. And my response to that was, yes, and if I were the King of England, it would make a huge difference. The young people were saying this, and we started using this email, and would you believe it? Our rates of response of what young people would send us back doubled. It went from 30% to 60%, which is believable, because it would never go to 100%. You'll never have a method that would appeal to all, but at least this was more than half. What we also noticed was we were able to pick people up very early and avoid them becoming very unwell, avoid admission to hospital, and also we weren't giving them the high doses of medication that we were doing previously. These were all benefits to young people. So
working on the same kind of problems, but there is very little collaboration. So in some areas. So I think that would be one of the things that could really push this in a good direction if we could collaborate on all levels. So I would like to remind us of Professor Peter Rosenbaum's very nice paper from 2012, The F Words in Childhood Disability. I swear this is how we should think. it's a very good paper, and it involves all the parts of all the important parts of for a child with disabilities. Function includes the physical part of you know, the motor function, this communication ability, cognitive function. Family includes the most important people in the life of the child. Fitness involves health, general health issues, fun, happiness, you know, anything that can bring light into the life of these children. Friends, again, remember 9 out of 10 had peer problems. Future has to do with what we can provide to make sure that these children have a good future. So just to conclude, psychiatric disorders are highly prevalent in children with CP, and it seems to stay high. It goes even higher in pre-adolescence. And this indicates a need for mental health screening and follow-up of mental health disorders in children with CP, and possibly also all neurodevelopmental disorders. And a collaboration between different units and across levels of expertise should be encouraged. And we should think of all aspects in the lives of this child, because it all fits together. So the 6 F's are important to keep in mind. So, thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, Hannah. So we'll take some time for questions if people have them.
You can hear me. Just wanted to get your thoughts on what were the findings on like gender, like boys and girls? Any significant findings?
We found a higher prevalence of mental health problems in boys. Yes, it probably is also reflected in the high prevalence of attention problems and autism spectrum disorders. So there is a gender bias there.
Hannah, I just wanted to, because our experience as well working with other groups of intellectual disability is that there's a high difficulty of peer problems, and whether that would be as much to do with the high rates of autism and ADHD and behaviour rather than the movement disorder by itself.
I think you're very right. I do not think it has to do with the movement disorder. I mean, we do have ramps, we do have elevators, so moving around is not the big problem, and we do see differences in children who have normal cognitive abilities and no other neurodevelopmental disorders. Sitting in a wheelchair, they usually have no spinal cord injury, for instance, usually have less problems with peers. So I think it has to do with autism spectrum disorders, and I think we don't always have enough criteria, or we don't always have enough symptoms to meet all the criteria for an autism spectrum disorders, but we surely do have lots of rigidity. We find a lot of rigidity, lots of special interests. My impression is that relating to other people is one of the better sides, whereas the more rigid, the more sort of less flexible part of having a neurodevelopmental disorder is something that really makes it difficult, is a challenge in relation to
is worldwide, and it's becoming a serious health problem worldwide. And since it does not, it is not just limited to any specific age group. It's present everywhere, and it doesn't spare the small ones or the young ones. The age factor is a prominent, important factor which has been a deciding factor or important role in predicting the patterns of the psychiatric presentation, psychiatric comorbidity. So, Hence, talking about the young ones, the adolescent group, the magnitude of these mental illness in this children group, young age group, is understood by everyone. But still, since the recent time, it has not been quantified well. But with the evidences are coming up, which shows that the mental illness is present in the children group, children and adolescents, as well as alarming evidences are coming up which says it's in increasing number. And different studies have shown that it's in the impact of mental illness in the children is increasing annually at least at the expected of around 10 to 20%. And similarly, the morbidity that affects the children is 5 out of the 10 leading causes, which causes the disability in that group, as well as we see that they need treatment and suffer from a serious mental illnesses, which are delayed in most of the cases in our context, and because of various factors like mentioned by my previous speaker as well, like the lack of proper expertise, as well as lack of proper inpatient units, as well as the awareness and the stigma associated with it. So the treatment for these patients, these young ones in inpatient hospitalization has more challenges that we need to overcome. So why is it so important to talk about it and discuss? Because it has a worldwide this burden of the mental illness on the group, saying that it accounts for 20% of the serious mental illness, as well as this other studies in the Asian population, in the Asian countries, it has shown about similar prevalence, up to 20%. Also, suicide accounts for the third most leading cause of death in the adolescent age group. Also, the depression, which starts in the adolescent age group, has a very debilitating impact on their later life. That's why, and with all this information, we thought that we need to collect the information which will help us to know where we should work and where we should identify our needs and prioritize the need of care to this adolescent age group. And so we conduct, and also we found that most of the studies in our region, Nepal and India, were the OPD basis cases. And this study we did was in the inpatient study, also, and so we aimed to study about the psychiatric morbidity pattern presentation, diagnosis, and how the length of stay in the hospitalization. It's a retrospective study where we collected all the medical records of the admitted cases of 19 years and below, and which was for the last 4 years, 17 to 74. And the diagnoses were made according to ICD-10, and the data were collected on the demographic profiles and the diagnosis, length of stay, and the illness. And data was analyzed accordingly. So what we found in our result was the range was 8 to 9 years of age. The youngest was 8, and in which the youngest one was male in our case, and the median was 16.04, and median 16 years of age. What we found was the females, sorry for the slide, the females were outnumbered. There were more than 50%, 77 out of 131 patients we had according to the data. And similarly, almost all were single, but 11 of the patients were married, out of which females, 7 out of 11 were married females, and one of them was even pregnant.
And I really like the whole concept, and the application that you've developed is really heartwarming, and there's so many things to like about it. At the same time, I have a question for you. Like, in the age when people are so much into smartphones and technologies, and definitely this is one of the milestones, which is actually bringing the people out of using technology at the same time, also making it beneficial for them. So my question is like, what limitation do you see in this whole application and this whole project? What is the limitation that you would foresee?
So, not freely downloadable. Our vision is that once we get funding, and we are in the process of applying for full funding, we need about £100,000. to make this completely functional with all the functionality, and a little bit each year to keep it going. Not 100,000, much less, because iOS updates itself, and we need to keep up with that. We don't want any part of this. Once it's available, it'll be freely available on the app stores. Anybody can download it. We'll have to be careful, because you might tell us, I really hope that people like yourselves in Nepal, in India, anywhere in the world really, if you feel that there's a need, we could tweak it, we could adapt it, we could make it culturally relevant to your population. So we will make it freely available, essentially. In terms of its limitations, the first limitation is we need the 100,000. We haven't got it yet. It's always about the money. So we need that. We need to rigorously evaluate this. So, an N of 15 people testing out a beta prototype app and giving us excellent feedback. When most of them are part of the development, it's a very biased sample. It's pre-selected. So I have to admit that. Whether it'll be really successful eventually, we don't know. But even if 60% of our population starts to use it, that'd be huge numbers. So
I think everyone is very interested in what would help our patients long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much.